We're just days away from Election Day for the Memphis municipal election. This is for Memphis City Council members and, of course, the Memphis mayoral election. Let's bring in radio personality from WLOK Radio, Chip Washington, now to talk a little bit more about what we've seen so far and what we could anticipate for Thursday. Chip, always good to have you on the digital desk. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great, my friend. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you so much. So let's talk about the early voting numbers, because we know right now the early voting numbers are higher than they were 4 years ago and 8 years ago. What does that tell you, Chip?
Well, it tells me that people are finally starting to become engaged in this process. It also tells me that people are starting to figure out that this perhaps is the most consequential election that we've seen in the last decades, at least 20 to 30 years, where we have a wide open race. While the last time you and I had a conversation, there was still about 20-25% of the voting population who had yet to decide. But it seems like with the early voting numbers, as you stated, over 40,000 people, that's a pretty good start to all of this. That's a pretty good indication that people are taking this seriously. It bodes well for Election Day, hopefully.
Is there any candidate in your mind that benefits from a high voter turnout?
Well, that's a good question. I think that any of the top 3 to 4 candidates benefit from early voting. You know, we have 17, and of course that's going to split the vote in numerous ways. But I would think that anyone in the upper tier of candidates would be someone who would be very interested in getting out the vote and making sure that people, put the X by their name. You have Paul Young, of course, Sheriff Bonner, you have Van Turner, you have J.W. Gibson, and former Mayor Dr. Willie Harrington, who on my radio show, at least my daily radio show, his name is evoked at least 2 or 3 times during the program, which I still find very interesting.
You know, I was listening to some people go back and forth on which candidates maybe have an edge, and there were 4 that came up. You mentioned a couple of them there. The 4 that came up were Bonner and Harrington pulling, this person was saying, pulling from kind of the same pool, and then Turner and Young pulling from another similar pool. Do you see it this way? And what about all the ads that we're watching? We have just been flooded during this early voting season with all the ads. What do you think?
Well, I don't know about whether Harrington and Bonner are pulling from the same group of people. But in terms of the ads, of course, I do radio these days. And of course, we have ads running from at least 6 of the candidates. And, when people start to talk about the negativity in terms of the ads, this is nothing new. This is politics, at its best and at its worst. A lot of people, though, are becoming more sophisticated in not necessarily focusing on all the negativity that the ads portray, but really the substance of the conversation that the candidates are having that are asking for your vote. I think people are becoming more and more turned off by the negative campaign ads. But, if you're a front runner in any political race, they're going to take shots at you. Other candidates are going to come at you and trying to convince other folks that, you're this, you're that, when that may not necessarily be the case, while trying to bolster their case. So dirty ads, dirty politics, misleading advertising is really all, unfortunately, a part of the political process.
You mentioned front runner, Chip, so I'll just go ahead and ask, who do you think is right now at the front runner? And if you don't want to answer that, what about Thursday night after polls close? How long is it going to be before we find out who is going to be the next mayor of Memphis? Do you think this will be a long night?
Well, to answer your first question, I don't have a problem. I mean, I think according to the polls, Paul Young and Floyd Bonner and maybe even former Mayor Harrington are the ones who are at the top uh, in terms of this. And as far as Thursday is concerned, I think that a lot of that depends on the turnout. And I think that's going to be key critical in terms of how long a night it is. And we could be surprised. I think it could be a long night. You have, again, people need to understand that 17 candidates, while 10, 11, 12 of them may not necessarily be considered even viable in this election, they're still in it, and they still have support from friends and colleagues and other people. So there's going to be a splitting of the vote. And that is going to make this race more of a plurality than a majority. That is why it is so key critical, Andrew, that people get out on Thursday and vote. And that's why I say when I looked at the numbers that you mentioned at the top, 40,000 plus people early voted, which is more people that have voted the last 8 years, the last two mayoral elections. And that's a pretty interesting sign. So what happens on election night, if we get past the 25 or 30% of all registered voters, and we go higher than that, that's where it could get really interesting. And, perhaps we may not know who the new mayor is until late into the evening, but we'll have to wait and see how that plays out.
Certainly, it is, and these are numbers that we're seeing over 50,000. I mean, looking at Saturday, apparently early Saturday, all the early voting on Saturday, it was almost a record amount. So there's like in the mid 50s. But your station WLOK is predominantly African American and very historic in the Memphis area. Tell me from your perspective, and you're a talk show host there. What do your listeners say? Do they say who they're voting for, and what are they looking for in a mayor?
Well, in terms of what they're looking for someone who can fix the various problems that the city has. You and I talked about this before. Whomever gets the seat is going to have surmountable challenges when the new year gets here. From various different areas and different perspectives. My listeners don't necessarily talk about who they're voting for, although, as I badger them on a daily basis about all of this and the importance of voting, I am starting to hear more names coming up in terms of that. I think, like everyone else, crime is the number one issue. But there are so many other issues. I mean, there are infrastructure issues, there are economic issues, there are poverty issues. There are tremendous challenges of law enforcement, with these investigations happening, who's going to lead our law enforcement as we get into a new year, what are they going to do? And quite honestly, in terms of me listening, I hadn't heard anybody give anything, I don't know, particularly overwhelming as to how they're going to solve crime. One person can't do that. There are a myriad of issues, but I will tell you this. I'm getting more and more phone calls that say, you know what, time out for the negative stuff. We don't need that. I mean, right now we're at a critical juncture in our city in so many particular areas that we need to focus in on the real issues and the real concerns that people have. And I think that people are becoming very turned off in terms of the negativity. But again, the early numbers that you mentioned, that to me shows a pretty good sign in terms that people are interested. Now, early voting is over. So now we have Thursday. I do expect to see long lines at many precincts in and around the city, which could be pretty interesting in terms of who comes out on top and just how long a night it will be.
Interesting is the understatement of the year, Chip. We will certainly be watching, and thanks so much for weighing in. I appreciate it. Radio personality from WLOK Radio, Chip Washington, joining us on the digital desk. We appreciate it as always, Chip. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate you.